celebrate the success of Head Start, it is imperative that we give more black kids access. In 2012, Head Start served less than 40% of eligible children, roughly 300,000 black kids. Early Head Start currently serves fewer than 4% of all eligible infants and toddlers.
Mr. Johns, are you nearing the end of your testimony?
Yes, ma'am. Much more needs to be done to increase investments in this area. And while I have summarized some of the challenges facing black boys during the earliest years of life, I want to ensure that our conversations are focused on solutions, on underscoring the opportunities we have to make investments that result in success for black men and boys. In the coming months, the initiative will continue to facilitate critical conversations in the following areas. 1, raising awareness of and increasing opportunities to access programs that conversations in the following areas. 1, raising awareness of and increasing opportunities to access programs that enhance education, employment, and entrepreneurship for black men and boys. We need to increase the number of black educators, discuss the impact that socio-cultural factors like trauma and toxic stress have on learning and development, and strengthen the relationships that parents and mentors have with students in schools to improve achievement and support development. 2, we will ensure that all caring adults are engaged in supporting black male success, whether volunteering to host activities to provide black boys with an opportunity to develop academic or social skills, or leveraging technology to ensure that black kids have access to civic engagement and leadership development opportunities. And finally, we will take on the essential task of changing the way that we talk about black boys in public and in private, as we have modeled here today. We must ensure that what we say and how we demonstrate our support for black men and boys is aligned with ensuring that they are and that they feel valued, supported, and protected. And while we must be careful not to generalize and suggest that all black boys are in crisis, all black men can benefit from knowing that they are loved, valued, supported, and protected, especially at home and in their communities. And to do this, we must ensure that we are doing all we can to develop their skills, to create protective, safe environments. And this requires correcting myths that give life to fallacies that black boys cannot achieve at extremely high levels in spite of generations of brothers who have done exactly that. We must dispel myths like there are more black men in prison than in college. You see, when I worked as a classroom teacher, some of my colleagues used that myth to convince themselves that they didn't have to do the tough work of investing in young black boys because we all end up dead or in jail. Changing the narrative around black boys requires telling more stories about everyday examples of achievement and success, of resilience and grit. It should not be the case that we celebrate single events like Tim King sending an entire class of black boys to college, not only because the work that educators at Urban Prep accomplish is tremendous, but also because there are countless schools who have figured out how to nurture and support black boys. We should tell stories each and every day about the many ways that black boys are excelling and innovating, giving support to their families, their schools, and their communities. We must talk about opportunities to optimize these chances for black men of all ages to support each other and to support boys younger than they are. And we have to continue to have conversations in public and in private about opportunities and obligations we have as a nation to be inspired by the grace of the Trayvon Martin family. We have to talk about it. And we have to support programs and people in our community who are doing the work of saving our sons, beginning early. Beyond simply talking about it, we must ensure that we move past the rhetoric to ensure that these gains are made. And as we do this work, it's also important that we not neglect our daughters in the process, because our black girls and women need our care, love, and support too. These are but a few of the ways in which the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence is engaging in this work. I look forward to identifying ways that we can work further to support black men and boys throughout this country for generations to come. Our boys need us to do this work, and the collective economic, social, and national security of our great nation requires it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johns. Our next presenter, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, who is an American Book Award recipient and 2 times the NAACP Image Award winner, is one of the nation's most influential and renowned public intellectuals. He has been named one of the 150 most powerful African Americans by Ebony magazine. The Philadelphia Weekly contends that Dr. Dyson is reshaping what it means to be a public intellectual by becoming the most visible black academic of his time. Dyson has also authored and edited 18 books pertaining to African American leaders, racial profiling, and racial relations in America. Currently, Dr. Dyson is a sociology professor at Georgetown University and has previously taught at some of the nation's most prestigious universities, including Brown, Chapel Hill, Columbia, and the University of Pennsylvania, primarily on topics regarding issues affecting black youth and the future of the black community given the current social, economic, and political conditions. Dr. Dyson.
Thank you so much. I want to thank, is this on? I want to thank Congresswoman Norton and Congressman Dave. I want to thank Congresswoman Norton and Congressman Davis for convening this panel even before the verdict, it should be announced. And with that kind of prescience and that kind of insight about why we are confronting the issues that we are confronting here today. And to all of the distinguished colleagues here in Congress, and of course to Mr. Johns for that great comment, and Attorney Crump and Mr. Martin for their courage and their valor, and Mr. Mfume for his sharp insight. I want to talk about young men, teens, and youth. I myself was a teen father, lived on welfare for 3 years, didn't go to college until I was 21. So I understand some of the existential drama that attaches to black boys, males, and men who have been particularly subject to the arbitrary stigma and pathology that attaches to young men in American society, but leave aside the incredible valor and the vitality of their struggles to claim decent spaces in American society. What do teens who are black and male face in our culture? Well, let's be honest. There's a cultural backdrop. All black people live under suspicion. Trayvon Martin is but the most ready and apt metaphor for the suspicion to which we are subject. Black humanity has been suspected from the beginning of our sojourn in American society. I don't need to give a history lesson about that. The great Thomas Jefferson, the architect of Monticello and the Declaration of Independence, also wrote notes on Virginia, where he questioned the cerebral abilities and the intellectual acuity and the reason of black people, even as at night, retiring from his study, engaged in relations with a young woman whose loins trapped his logic. So that the reality of our humanity being under suspicion is critical as the backdrop to understand the unfolding and evolving perception of black people in America. Our humanity has been questioned and our intelligence has been questioned. As a result of that, black teens inherit a culture where the suspicion and skepticism about their humanity and their intelligence are part and parcel of what we deal with on the daily. This is why, for instance, to echo Mr. Johns, we not only talk about black male stereotypes, we talk about black female stereotypes, because had Rachel Jeantel been believed, had the stereotypical representation that articulates her as somehow subhuman, and not just from white Americans, but black too, skeptical about what she is, speaking 3 languages, perhaps her testimony would have been believed and the outcome of the trial could have been shaped, because black women are under vicious assault as well, and as a result of that, mothers mired in poverty help young black men come to birth, and both of them receive the calumny and the slander of this culture. So young teens inherit a culture that unconsciously and consciously engages in the skepticism and suspicion of their existence. The educational system into which they are thrust expels them at a rate 2.5 times greater than their white peers. So you're in school and you get kicked out for stuff that your white peers don't. Not only that, they are subject to detention and also put in special education programs that target them specifically as being less capable intellectually. What happens then is that they are also subject to the criminal justice system through nonviolent drug offenses. Even though the self-reporting of young white people suggests they do drugs about the same rate, if not a little bit more, than do black and other kids, it stands to reason. If you got more disposable cash, you got more time and capacity and ability to engage in nefarious activities on the extra-legal sense. So the point is that white kids are doing drugs in the same way black kids are, but white kids are not being put in jail because they are not suspected, but because they are not viewed as likely to engage in that kind of behavior, they are not profiled. And so young black men, teens in general, are profiled, not just by the police department when they go into stores. Retail profiling, you ain't got to be a teen to be subject to that. I got a black card and yet I'm pro-police department when they go into stores. Retail profiling, you ain't got to be a teen to be subject to that. I got a black card and yet I'm profiled. Though I painted it last night, it was green. But the point is that we are subject to that kind of racial and retail profile. The disproportionate number of black males who are put in the criminal justice system suggests to us that there is a targeting of African American men, particularly teens, beginning in the 14, 15, 16-year age range, that makes them subject to adult penalties in the criminal justice system. Many of these kids are tried as adults. And the book, so to speak, of the law is thrown against them, even for first-time offenses. And then even more broadly, stereotypes of black male and youth identity. We could have an empirical crush to verify the assault of the state upon vulnerable black people, but I want to weave a narrative and tell a story to make you feel the compelling character of the assault on young black teens. The reality is these stereotypes are out there. Even noted Washington Post columnists say that, let's be honest, the hoodie is the uniform of the criminal. Not for Mark Zuckerberg, not for Bill O'Reilly, not for Gerardo, all of whom, with the exception of Mr. Zuckerberg, have assaulted black people and black teens for being engaged in the self-perpetuation of a legacy of assault upon them because of the clothing they wear. So that this sartorial profiling, this clothing profiling, suggests that black people can't even dress with the same kind of freedom that our white peers do. And in this case, young black teens can't because they will be automatically assumed to be a thug. Now, some people say, well, it's your problem. It's hip-hop culture. Hip-hop created this. Really? Before the rise of hip-hop culture 30, 35 years ago, black men were being profiled. Black teens were being seen as preternaturally given to inclinations to be criminal. So excuse me, that's not the case. Now, has some element of hip-hop culture glorified and reinforced the devaluing of black life? Of course it has. But it's also spoken against it. Tupac said just the other day, I got lynched by some crooked cops, and to this day, them same cops on the beat getting major pay, but when I get my check, they taking tax out, so we paying the cops to knock the blacks out. Jay-Z said, God forgive me for my brash delivery, but I remember vividly what these streets did to me. Picture me allowing these clowns to nitpick at me, portray me like a pickaninny. So they are combating the vicious misrepresentation of black masculine identity by resorting to the very violence that is critical to American culture and American identity, and the sense of machismo that young black people appropriate has been given to them by a culture that creates laws like Stand Your Ground, and that creates a gun industry that is obsessed to a nearly erotic intensity with guns as the manifestation of their manhood. They ain't invented the game, they plan it in their own way. So the reality is, how do we deal with the stereotypical representations of young black people? And now our friends on the right suggest it's black on black crime. Where you been? We've been talking about that. When Newtown happens, cameras are there. When Aurora happens, cameras are there. When Chicago happens, cameras are not there. But now we pathologize those young black people. And by the way, black people have been marching from time immemorial against the vicious legacy of white supremacy that occupies black minds, that leads us to kill each other, to hate each other, to despise the very presence that we represent. So we know about black-on-black crime as a reflection of a broader pathology, and both of them must be arrested. But the reality is politicians don't show up